The Montana mountains watched silently, ancient guardians shrouded in twilight's purple embrace. On that October evening in 2018, the air hung heavy with the scent of pine and approaching snow, as if nature itself held its breath before winter's first assault. No one could have predicted how a desperate knock on a lonely cabin door would forever change two broken lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Lucas Blackwood wiped condensation from the kitchen window and stared into the gathering darkness. At 38, his face bore the weathered lines of a man who'd seen more than his share of hard seasons, both in the land and in life. 3 years had passed since the accident that took Jessica and their unborn child on that icy stretch of highway. 3 years of solitude on this remote stretch of Montana wilderness he'd stubbornly refused to sell. The coffee had gone cold in his mug hours ago. Another quiet evening stretched before him, filled with nothing but the crackle of the wood stove and the occasional howl of coyotes in the distant hills. His nearest neighbor was 5 miles down the dirt road, exactly how he preferred it. Lucas had built this place with his own hands, a rustic 2-story cabin with a wraparound porch and windows that framed the mountains like living paintings. Once meant for a family, now just an echo chamber for his grief. The first flakes of snow began to fall, illuminated in the yellow glow of the porch light. Winter coming early this year. Lucas turned from the window, contemplating whether to bother with dinner or just call it a night, when a sound froze him mid-step. A knock. Faint, but unmistakable. Lucas frowned. Nobody came up this road after dark, especially not with snow starting. He waited, thinking perhaps he'd imagined it, but then it came again, more insistent this time. With a sigh, he crossed to the door, the floorboards creaking beneath his boots. Probably Dan from down the valley, having trouble with his truck again. The old rancher was the closest thing Lucas had to a friend these days, though friend might be stretching it. He pulled open the heavy wooden door, ready to offer Dan a tow, or at least a place to wait out the weather. The words died in his throat. A woman stood on his porch, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. Her face was pale with exhaustion, eyes wide and fearful. But it wasn't her unexpected presence that rendered Lucas speechless. It was what accompanied her. 3 identical little girls, no more than 4 years old, huddled against her legs, bundled in mismatched winter clothes, several sizes too large, and cradled in her arms, wearing what appeared to be a hand-knitted pink sweater complete with sleeves, was a small, pot-bellied pig. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her voice hoarse as if she hadn't used it in days. "Our car broke down a mile back. Is there any chance we could use your phone?" Her eyes darted nervously over her shoulder toward the darkened road. One of the little girls peered up at Lucas with solemn brown eyes. "Mommy says it's not safe outside," she whispered. Lucas stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the bizarre tableau before him. A desperate woman, triplet daughters, and a pig in a sweater appearing like an apparition on his doorstep in the first snowfall of the season. The pig snuffled, breaking the spell. Lucas stepped back from the doorway. "Come in," he said gruffly, surprising himself. "Phone's in the kitchen." Relief washed over the woman's face. "Thank you. We won't stay long, I promise." As they filed past him into the warm cabin, Lucas caught a glimpse of something that made his stomach tighten. A bruise, partially hidden by her scarf, blooming across her collarbone. And there was something else. The way she constantly checked behind her, the barely contained panic in her movements. She wasn't just stranded. She was running from something. Or someone. The triplets stood in a tight cluster in his living room, taking in the rustic space with wide eyes. The cabin, with its exposed beams and stone fireplace, suddenly seemed foreign even to Lucas as he saw it through their eyes. A strange man's home, far from anywhere. The woman set the pig down carefully, and it immediately waddled toward the fireplace, drawn by the warmth. "I'm Elena," the woman said, extending her hand but not quite meeting his eyes. "These are my daughters, Sophie, Lily, and Emma." She gestured to the pig, who had now settled contentedly before the fire. "And that's Hamlet." Lucas nodded, uncomfortable with the sudden invasion of his carefully constructed solitude. Lucas Blackwood. Phones through there. He pointed toward the kitchen. Elena moved toward the kitchen, then hesitated. "Girls, stay right here where I can see you, okay? Don't touch anything." The children nodded solemnly, still huddled together like a single organism with 6 eyes and 3 hearts. Lucas noticed that their coats were thin for the weather, their shoes worn at the toes. While Elena made her call, Lucas stood awkwardly in his own living room, unsure what to do with the 3 identical sets of eyes watching him intently. The pig, Hamlet, had stretched out before the fire, its sweater-clad belly rising and falling in contented slumber. A soft, rumbling snore emanated from the animal. One of the girls, he couldn't tell which one, giggled. "Hamlet snores louder than Grandpa Joe," she whispered to her sisters. Lucas found himself fighting an unexpected smile. "Does he always wear clothes?" he asked, gesturing toward the pig. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The boldest of the 3 stepped forward slightly. "He gets cold easy," she explained with the serious authority of a child. "Mommy made his sweater from our old blankets. Pink is his favorite color." From the kitchen, Lucas could hear Elena's voice, tense and urgent. "No, I can't. We can't go back there. I know it's not ideal." A pause. "Please, Marcy, just one night until I figure something out." Another pause, longer this time. "I understand, thanks anyway." The defeat in her voice was palpable. She returned to the living room, her attempt at a composed expression failing to mask her desperation. "Thank you for the phone. We should get going." Lucas frowned. "Your car's broken down and it's starting to snow. Where exactly are you planning to go?" Elena's eyes darted away. "We'll figure something out. Maybe someone will come by." Even she didn't sound convinced. Outside, the gentle snowfall had intensified, thick flakes swirling in the porch light. Lucas knew the forecast. This was just the beginning of what was predicted to be the first significant storm of the season. "Nobody's coming by tonight," he said flatly. "This road sees maybe 1 car a day when the weather's good." One of the girls tugged at her mother's jacket. "Mommy, I'm hungry," she whispered. Lucas watched as Elena's composure threatened to crack. He recognized the look, someone at the end of their rope, trying desperately to hold it together for just a little longer. He'd seen it in his own mirror more times than he cared to remember after Jessica died. He cleared his throat. "Look, I was about to make dinner anyway. You all should eat something while you figure out your next move." The relief in Elena's eyes was tempered with suspicion. "That's very kind, but we've imposed enough." "It's just food," Lucas replied with a shrug. "And information. I know every mechanic within 50 miles. Might be able to help with your car." Elena hesitated, clearly weighing the risks of accepting help from a stranger against the more immediate dangers of being stranded in a snowstorm with 3 young children. At that moment, Hamlet let out a particularly thunderous snore, causing all 3 girls to dissolve into giggles. The sound, so foreign in his silent home, hit Lucas like a physical force. How long had it been since laughter echoed off these walls? "Stay," he found himself saying, the word emerging before he'd fully formed the thought. Then, as if needing to place a condition on the offer, to make it less like charity, he added with a nod toward the pig, "If it don't snore louder than my old truck." The absurdity of the condition hung in the air between them. Then, unexpectedly, Elena smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her tired face. "That's a dangerous bet. Hamlet's been known to wake the dead with his snoring." Something shifted in the cabin's atmosphere, some of the tension dissipating like smoke up the chimney. The triplets looked to their mother, then to Lucas, then back to their mother, waiting. "Just for tonight," Elena conceded finally. "And we'll be out of your hair first thing tomorrow." Lucas nodded, already wondering what he'd gotten himself into. "I've got a spare room upstairs. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm." As he led them upstairs to the room that had once been intended as a nursery, Lucas was acutely aware of how unprepared his home was for visitors, especially young children. The room contained only a double bed and an old dresser, a layer of dust on both. He'd kept the door closed for years, unable to face the remnants of shattered dreams. "I'll get some extra blankets," he mumbled, embarrassed by the room's stark emptiness. Elena touched his arm lightly, stopping him. "This is perfect. Thank you." When he returned with an armload of blankets, he found Elena helping the girls out of their coats. Up close, the children's resemblance was even more striking. Same heart-shaped faces, same dark curls, same solemn brown eyes. Yet he was beginning to notice subtle differences in their expressions and mannerisms. "Sophie likes the window seat," one of them announced, pointing to her sister who had already climbed onto the cushioned alcove overlooking the mountains. "That's Lily," Elena explained, noticing his confusion. "She's the family spokesperson. Emma's the quiet one." Hamlet had followed them upstairs and was now circling the room, investigating every corner with his snout. The pink sweater, Lucas noticed, had small embroidered H's along the trim. "Quite the entourage you're traveling with," Lucas commented as he set down the blankets. A shadow passed over Elena's face. "Not exactly how I planned things, but we make it work." She straightened, squaring her shoulders. "I should help with dinner." "It's the least I can do." Downstairs in the kitchen, Lucas realized he hadn't cooked for anyone but himself in years. His refrigerator held little more than beer, condiments, and leftover venison stew. The pantry wasn't much better. Canned goods, coffee, and the basics. "I don't have much that's kid-friendly," he admitted, as Elena surveyed his meager supplies. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing more bruises on her forearms that she quickly covered again when she caught him looking. "You'd be surprised what kids will eat when they're hungry enough." "Mind if I improvise?" Lucas gestured toward the kitchen. "Be my guest." While Elena worked, transforming his simple ingredients into something that smelled increasingly appealing, Lucas found himself drawn into conversation with the triplets, who had brought Hamlet back downstairs with them. "How old is he?" Lucas asked, watching as the pig investigated the perimeter of his living room with methodical determination. 2, Emma answered softly. It was the first time he'd heard the quietest triplets speak. "Same as us, but in pig years." "They had the same birthday for a while," Lily elaborated. "But now we're 4, and he's still 2 because animals are different." Sophie remained by the window, watching the snow with fascination. "It never snowed where we used to live," she said without turning around. Lucas wanted to ask where that was, but something in the way Elena tensed at her daughter's words made him hold his tongue. Instead, he asked, "Does Hamlet do any tricks?" This question animated all 3 girls. "Show him, Hamlet!" Lily commanded, clapping her hands. To Lucas's surprise, the pig immediately sat down, looking expectantly at the children. "Spin!" Sophie called out, leaving her post by the window. Hamlet rotated in a somewhat clumsy circle, his hooves clicking against the hardwood floor. "Bow!" Emma's soft voice seemed to carry special weight with the pig, who dipped his head low in a remarkably elegant bow for such a stout creature. "High five!" All 3 girls said in unison. Hamlet lifted his front right hoof, which Lily gently tapped with her small hand. Despite himself, Lucas was impressed. "Where did you get him?" The girls looked at each other, then toward the kitchen where their mother was stirring something on the stove. "He was a surprise," Lily answered carefully, in the way children do when they've been instructed not to share certain details. By the time Elena called them all to dinner, Lucas's living room had been transformed. The triplets had arranged themselves on the rug before the fire, with Hamlet snoring between them. They'd found an old deck of cards in a drawer and were building elaborate structures that the pig occasionally demolished with an inquisitive snout, sending them into fits of giggles. The simple dinner, a pasta dish Elena had somehow conjured from his limited ingredients, tasted better than anything Lucas had eaten in months. The girls chattered throughout the meal, their initial shyness forgotten as they regaled him with stories about Hamlet's adventures and misadventures. "He ate Mrs. Carson's petunias," Sophie informed him gravely. "And Mommy's favorite shoes," Lily added. "But he's sorry," Emma concluded softly, patting the pig who had stationed himself hopefully beside her chair. Lucas couldn't help but notice how Elena's gaze constantly drifted toward the windows, checking the darkness beyond. Every distant sound made her tense, her hand instinctively moving toward her children as if to gather them close. After dinner, as the storm intensified outside, howling around the eaves of the cabin, Lucas helped Elena settle the girls into the upstairs bedroom. Hamlet, of course, insisted on joining them, climbing onto the foot of the bed with surprising agility for an animal of his build. "I've never met a pig with such personality," Lucas commented as they descended the stairs, leaving the children already half asleep with their unusual guardian. Elena's smile was tinged with sadness. "Hamlet was supposed to be a small farm pig, according to the man who sold him to us. Turns out he's a full-sized pot-bellied pig. Just another thing that didn't turn out as advertised." There was bitterness in her voice that Lucas suspected had nothing to do with the pig. In the living room, with the children safely tucked away upstairs, Elena seemed to deflate, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. She sank onto the couch, staring into the fire. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting us stay. I know it's an imposition." Lucas poured 2 glasses of whiskey, offering her one. "It's no trouble. Not like I had big plans for the evening." She accepted the glass but didn't drink, just held it between her palms as if absorbing its warmth. "Can I ask why you're out here all alone? This seems like a lot of house for one person." The direct question caught him off guard. Most people in town knew his story and carefully avoided the subject. "It wasn't supposed to be just me," he answered finally. "My wife, Jessica, she died 3 years ago. Car accident on Highway 93. She was pregnant." Elena's eyes filled with understanding. "I'm so sorry." Lucas shrugged, an automatic response he'd developed to deflect sympathy. "What about you? Where are you headed with 3 kids and a pig in a snowstorm?" She stared into her untouched whiskey. "Away. Just away." From what? The question was blunt, but something told Lucas that Elena wasn't the type to appreciate being handled with kid gloves. Her eyes met his, defiant and afraid all at once. "My husband. The girl's father. The one who gave you those bruises?" Her hand went instinctively to her collarbone, where the edge of a purple mark was visible above her sweater. "Ex-husband legally. Not that it stopped him." She took a deep breath. "We've been divorced for 6 months, but Richard, he doesn't accept it. Says I belong to him. That no piece of paper changes that." Outside, the wind moaned around the cabin's corners, underlining her words with an eerie harmony. "We had a restraining order," Elena continued, her voice stronger now, as if having started her story she needed to purge it completely. "But he violated it twice. The judge gave him a slap on the wrist both times. Family court is complicated," they said. The bitterness in her laugh made Lucas's chest tighten. 3 nights ago he broke into our apartment. Said he was taking the girls, that I'd turned them against him. When I tried to stop him," she gestured to her bruises, "Hamlet, of all things, saved us. Bit him hard enough to make him let go of Sophie. The distraction gave me enough time to grab the girls and run." Lucas felt a cold rage building inside him, directed at a man he'd never met. "Have you gone to the police?" Elena's laugh was hollow. "Richard is the police, deputy sheriff in Missoula County. His buddies took the report, promised to look into it. One of them called him while I was still in the station." Her hands trembled slightly around the glass. "So we ran, cleaned out my savings, packed what we could carry, and just left. No destination in mind except, quote, far away." The gravity of her situation settled over Lucas like a physical weight. This wasn't just a woman with car trouble. She was in genuine danger, as were her children. "What's your plan?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "I was trying to reach my cousin in Spokane. She's the only family I have left who he doesn't know about. But the car," she sighed. "I thought we could make it there in one straight drive. But the transmission started slipping outside of Bozeman. I pushed it as far as it would go." Lucas considered this information, mentally calculating distances and options. "Spokane's still a good 5 hours from here in good weather. With this storm—" "I know," Elena interrupted. "Tomorrow I'll figure something out. Maybe get the car towed to town, see if it can be fixed." They both knew it was a thin hope. Car repairs weren't cheap, and Lucas suspected Elena's cleaned-out savings wouldn't stretch to cover major transmission work. From upstairs came the sound of soft snoring, not the girls, but Hamlet, the loyal pig standing guard at their feet. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Lucas, a widower mountain man sharing whiskey with a bruised runaway mother of triplets, while an overweight pig in a pink sweater snored upstairs. "Stay," he said suddenly, surprising himself for the second time that night. "Not just tonight, until you figure things out." Until it's safe. Elena stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope in her eyes. Why would you offer that? You don't know us. Lucas considered the question seriously. Why indeed? 3 years he'd spent avoiding connections, avoiding anything that might lead to more pain. Yet here he was, offering shelter to a woman with more complications than anyone he'd ever met. Because, he said slowly, sometimes the world throws people together for a reason, and sometimes a man gets tired of his own company. He attempted a smile. Besides, Hamlet's snoring isn't actually louder than my truck. The offer stands. Elena's eyes filled with tears, she quickly blinked away. I can't pay you. Not much, anyway. I don't need money, Lucas replied honestly. But I could use some help around here. Place has gotten away from me these past few years. She studied him, seeming to search for hidden motives. Finding none, she nodded slowly. Just until I can save enough to get us to Spokane. A week? Maybe 2? Or until Hamlet starts snoring louder, Lucas added, attempting humor to lighten the moment. A genuine smile crossed Elena's face, transforming it completely. In that instant, Lucas caught a glimpse of who she might have been before fear became her constant companion. Deal, she said, and raised her glass in a toast. As they sat before the fire, the storm raging outside but powerless to touch them within the cabin's sturdy walls, Lucas felt something shift inside him. A door long closed, creaking open just a fraction. Whether it was the right decision or a terrible mistake remained to be seen, but for the first time in 3 years he was curious to find out what tomorrow might bring. Upstairs, Hamlet's gentle snores mingled with the soft breathing of the triplets, a strange lullaby in a house that had known only silence for too long. The Montana mountains kept their vigil, ancient witnesses to unlikely beginnings born in desperate moments, as the snow continued to fall, covering the land in pristine white, a clean slate, a fresh start. Dawn arrived with a stillness that spoke of fresh snow. The world outside the cabin transformed into a pristine wonderland. Elena woke disoriented, momentarily panicked at the unfamiliar ceiling above her. The events of the previous day rushed back. The breakdown, the desperate knock on a stranger's door, the unexpected offer of sanctuary. She turned her head to find all 3 of her daughters still sleeping peacefully, their identical faces relaxed in slumber. Hamlet lay stretched across the foot of the bed, his pink sweater rumpled, one leg twitching as he chased dream rabbits. For a moment, she allowed herself the luxury of simply breathing, no looking over her shoulder, no calculating escape routes, no mentally rehearsing explanations to give to the girls about why they had to leave yet another temporary home. Just breathing, in and out, in the quiet of a mountain morning. The bruises on her arms and collarbone throbbed dully, a physical reminder of what they were running from. Richard's face flashed through her mind, handsome features twisted with rage, the terrifying transition from charming smile to violent fury that had defined the last years of their marriage. She pushed the image away, refusing to let him invade even her thoughts in this moment of peace. The smell of coffee drifted up from downstairs, followed by the clatter of pans. Their reluctant host was already awake. Elena slipped carefully from the bed, tucking the blanket around her daughters. She padded to the window, drawing back the curtain to assess their situation. Snow covered everything in sight, at least 8 inches of it, still falling in gentle flakes. The driveway had disappeared entirely, swallowed by white. Elena's heart sank. Even if her car could be fixed, they weren't going anywhere soon. Downstairs she found Lucas at the stove, his broad back to her as he worked over a cast-iron skillet. "Morning," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned, spatula in hand. "Morning. Coffee's fresh." He nodded toward a mug he'd already set out beside the pot. "Thank you." Elena poured herself a cup, warming her hands around it. "For everything." Lucas returned his attention to the skillet, where pancake batter was beginning to bubble. "Figured the kids might want something special for breakfast. There's syrup in the pantry if you want to grab it." Elena found herself studying him as she retrieved the syrup. In the clear light of morning, Lucas Blackwood was even more imposing than he had seemed the night before. Tall and solidly built, with shoulders broad enough to suggest years of physical labor. His dark hair was shot through with silver at the temples, and his face, though handsome in a rugged way, bore the deep lines of someone who had weathered profound grief. Yet there was a gentleness to him that belied his intimidating appearance. She'd seen it in the way he'd spoken to her daughters, and in the careful way he now prepared breakfast for children he'd met only hours ago. "You don't strike me as the pancake type," she commented, setting the syrup on the counter beside him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Jessica used to make them on Sundays." The name came out soft, weighted with memory. "Guess some habits stick with you." Before Elena could respond, the thundering of small feet on the stairs announced the triplets' awakening. They burst into the kitchen in a whirlwind of energy, still in their mismatched pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. Hamlet trotted behind them, his hooves clicking on the hardwood floor. "It snowed!" Sophie exclaimed, pressing her face to the kitchen window. "Mommy, look how much!" "Can we go outside?" Lily asked, already bouncing with anticipation. "Please, please, please." Emma, as usual, said nothing, but her eyes shone with the same excitement as her sister's. "Breakfast first," Elena said firmly. "Then we'll see." The girls clambered onto chairs at the table, suddenly noticing the pancakes Lucas was transferring to a platter. "Are those for us?" Lily asked, eyes wide. Lucas nodded, setting the platter in the center of the table. "Thought you might be hungry after your adventure yesterday." "We're always hungry," Sophie informed him matter-of-factly. "Mommy says we have hollow legs." "And Hamlet has the hollowest legs of all," Lily added, as the pig positioned himself hopefully beside her chair. Lucas raised an eyebrow at Elena. "Does he eat pancakes too?" "Hamlet eats everything," Elena confirmed with a small smile, "but he's supposed to be on a diet." Despite this declaration, she noticed that Lucas slipped the pig a small piece of pancake when he thought she wasn't looking. Hamlet accepted the offering with delicate manners that seemed incongruous for his species. As they ate, Elena observed the easy way Lucas interacted with her daughters. For a man who lived alone in the wilderness, he showed remarkable patience with their endless questions and constant chatter. When Emma, the shyest of the three, quietly asked for more syrup, he passed it without making a fuss, seeming to understand instinctively that drawing attention to her would only make her retreat further into her shell. After breakfast, true to their word, the girls campaigned vigorously for outdoor time. Elena hesitated, looking out at the still falling snow. "They don't have proper winter clothes," she explained to Lucas. "We left California in a hurry." Something flickered in his eyes at this inadvertent revelation of where they'd come from. "I might have something," he said, disappearing into what Elena now realized was a mudroom off the kitchen. He returned with an armload of children's snow gear, small parkas, boots, mittens, and hats, all somewhat worn but still serviceable. Elena stared at the items, a question in her eyes. "Neighbors' kids outgrew them," Lucas explained, not meeting her gaze. "They passed them along, thinking—" He trailed off, but Elena understood. "Thinking you'd have children of your own to use them someday." "Thank you," she said softly, helping the excited triplets into the winter gear. Everything was slightly too big, but with cuffs rolled and boots stuffed with extra socks, they made it work. Lucas opened the back door, revealing a covered porch that led to a vast expanse of snow-covered yard. "Stay where we can see you," he instructed. "Woods aren't safe, especially in weather like this." The girls needed no further invitation, tumbling out into the snow with shrieks of delight. Hamlet, after a moment's hesitation at the cold on his hooves, followed them, his pink sweater bright against the white landscape as he snuffled through the powder. Elena and Lucas stood on the porch, watching as the triplets discovered the joy of fresh snow for the first time. They flopped backward in unison, creating 3 perfect snow angels. Hamlet investigated each one, his snout leaving small impressions that had the girls giggling uncontrollably. "They've never seen snow before," Elena said, her breath fogging in the cold air. "Richard always refused to take us to the mountains in winter, said it was too much trouble." Lucas leaned against the porch railing. "Kids should see snow. It's one of those childhood rites of passage." Elena nodded, watching as her daughters now attempted to build a snowman, arguing good-naturedly about how big to make it, along with skinned knees and ice cream trucks and staying up to see the stars. "You didn't have those things growing up?" Lucas asked. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite her borrowed jacket. My childhood ended early. Mom died when I was 11. Dad worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I was the adult at home from then on. She glanced at him. You? Montana, born and raised, Lucas replied. Grew up on a ranch about 60 miles from here. Different kind of childhood. Hard work, responsibility young. But good parents, solid foundation. Is that why you came back here after? Elena hesitated, not wanting to probe his wound. After Jessica died? Lucas finished for her. Partly. We were living in Bozeman. Had good jobs, were saving for a family. After the accident, I couldn't stand the sympathy, the constant reminders. His jaw tightened. Bought this place as an escape. Somewhere to heal. Or at least somewhere to hurt in private. Elena understood that impulse all too well. Has it worked? The healing part? Lucas was quiet for a long moment, watching as Emma, the quietest triplet, carefully placed a carrot nose on the misshapen snowmen they'd created. Some days better than others, he finally answered. A squeal of laughter drew their attention. Hamlet had decided to help with the snowman construction, and was now pushing a snowball with his snout, his sweater collecting snow as he worked. I've never seen a pig so devoted, Lucas commented, clearly grateful for the change in subject. Elena smiled, watching her unlikely pet. Hamlet was supposed to be a spite purchase, if you can believe it. Richard bought him as a piglet to punish me for some imagined transgression. Thought I'd be disgusted, that I'd refuse to keep him in the house. Her expression softened. Instead, Hamlet and I formed an alliance of sorts. He became my silent witness, the only one who saw everything that happened behind closed doors. And never judged, Lucas observed. Never judged, Elena confirmed. Just offered unconditional love, especially to the girls. He'd sleep outside their door when Richard was in one of his moods, almost like he was standing guard. Lucas's eyes darkened. Smart pig. Smarter than I was, Elena said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Stayed far too long in a situation I should have left at the first sign of trouble. We all make choices we'd take back if we could, Lucas said quietly. Hindsight's the cruelest gift. Before Elena could respond, Lily came running up to the porch, cheeks pink with cold and excitement. Mommy! Mr. Lucas, come see our snowman family. We made one for each of us, even Hamlet. Drawn by her enthusiasm, they followed her to where Sophie and Emma were putting the finishing touches on not 1, but 5 lumpy snow figures, 3 small ones representing the triplets. A taller one for Elena, and a massive one that could only be Lucas. And look, Sophie pointed proudly to a small mound with sticks for legs and a carrot snout. Hamlet has his own snow pig. Lucas knelt beside the Snow family, examining each one with exaggerated seriousness. Fine craftsmanship, he declared, making the girls beam with pride. But I think they need something more. He disappeared into the cabin, returning moments later with a collection of items, a scarf, buttons, an old hat, and a battered pair of sunglasses. Together they decorated the Snow family, the girls directing the placement of each accessory with solemn importance. Elena stood slightly apart, watching this unlikely scene unfold. Her daughters, who had been so traumatized by Richard's final, violent outburst that Emma had stopped speaking entirely for 2 days afterward, were now laughing and playing in the snow with a man they'd met just hours ago. Even more remarkably, they seemed completely at ease with him. Children, Elena thought, were either the worst or the best judges of character. In this case, she was beginning to believe it was the latter. As the morning wore on and the snow continued to fall, Elena found herself relaxing incrementally. The cabin, which had seemed merely a temporary shelter the night before, now felt like a fortress against both the weather and the dangers they'd fled. Lucas moved through his day with quiet competence, checking the generator, bringing in firewood, making minor repairs. All the tasks of a man accustomed to self-sufficiency in an isolated environment. When the girls finally came inside, soaked and exhausted from their snow adventures, Elena helped them change into dry clothes. Hamlet, his sweater wet and snow-crusted, submitted to having it removed and hung by the fire to dry. Without his pink garment, he looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable. "He needs a blanket," Emma whispered, the most words she'd strung together since their arrival. Lucas, overhearing, disappeared upstairs and returned with a faded quilt. "This should work," he said, draping it over the pig, who grunted appreciatively and promptly fell asleep before the fire. "You're good with them," Elena observed later, as they prepared lunch while the girls napped, worn out from their morning exertions. The girls, I mean, and even Hamlet. Lucas shrugged, slicing bread for sandwiches. "Animals are easy. They either trust you or they don't, no games. Kids are similar in some ways. They see through pretense. Have you ever thought about—" Elena trailed off, realizing the insensitivity of what she'd been about to ask. "Having my own?" Lucas finished, setting down the knife. "Every day for 3 years. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Jessica was 4 months pregnant when the accident happened. We'd just found out it was going to be a girl." Elena's heart constricted. "I'm so sorry, Lucas. I shouldn't have—" "It's okay," he interrupted. "Talking about her, them, it hurts, but it's a different kind of hurt than pretending they never existed." Elena understood completely. There was power in acknowledgement, in speaking truths aloud instead of burying them beneath silence. "The upstairs room," she said slowly. "That was going to be the nursery, wasn't it?" Lucas nodded, returning to his task of making sandwiches. "Started converting it after we found out. Then, after, I just closed the door. Couldn't bear to finish it. Couldn't bear to change it back." The magnitude of what he'd done in opening that room to them, the sanctuary he'd created out of his own pain, struck Elena with full force. This wasn't just generosity. It was a kind of sacred trust. After lunch, while the girls played a board game they'd found in a hall closet, Lucas brought out a large map and spread it across the kitchen table. "We need to talk about your situation," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Your ex-husband, he's law enforcement in Missoula County?" Elena nodded, a knot forming in her stomach at the mere mention of Richard. "Deputy sheriff. Been there 12 years, has friends in departments all over the state." Lucas's finger traced the route from Missoula to their current location. "And he knows you're headed west?" "He knows I have family in Washington state. Not specifically Spokane, but he could figure it out." Elena twisted her wedding ring, a habit she hadn't been able to break despite being legally divorced for months. "Richard is thorough when he wants something. And he wants the girls." "Not you?" Lucas asked, his voice carefully neutral. Elena gave a bitter laugh. "Me he wants to punish. The girls he wants to possess, to mold in his image." She lowered her voice, glancing toward the living room where her daughters were still engrossed in their game. "He never wanted triplets, you know. When we found out, he was furious, like I'd deliberately complicated his life. He barely acknowledged Emma after they were born. She was the smallest, the quietest, called her the spare." Lucas's expression darkened. "The man sounds like a real piece of work." "He can also be incredibly charming when he wants to be," Elena added. "That's what makes him dangerous. People believe him, trust him. The perfect officer, husband, father." She shook her head. "I believed it too at first." Lucas studied the map again. "Spokane makes sense as a destination, but it's also predictable. If he's looking for you, that's where he'll check first." The knot in Elena's stomach tightened. "I don't have anywhere else to go. My cousin Marcy is literally my only family left." "What about heading north instead of west?" Lucas suggested, his finger moving up the map toward the Canadian border. "More options that way. And international boundaries complicate things, even for law enforcement." Elena shook her head. "We don't have passports. After Richard's first violation of the restraining order, I applied for them, but they haven't arrived yet." Another plan thwarted by circumstances beyond her control, Lucas frowned, considering. "How much does he know about your route? Would he know about the car trouble?" "I don't think so. We left 3 nights ago, and I've been careful. Cash only, staying off main roads." Elena traced her own route on the map. "But if he's put out an APB, then every cop in the state might be looking for your car," Lucas finished. "Which is currently broken down about a mile from my driveway." The implications of this settled between them like a physical presence. If Richard tracked them to the car, it would lead him straight to the cabin. "We should leave," Elena said, pushing back from the table. "As soon as the roads are clear. I can't put you at risk like this." Lucas's hand covered hers, stopping her. "Running blindly isn't a plan, Elena. It's a panic response." It's kept us alive so far, she countered. And it's exhausted you and traumatized your children, he said gently. There's a difference between running away from danger and moving towards safety. His words struck a chord so deep within her that tears sprang to her eyes. How long had she been running? Not just from Richard, but from her own fears, her own shame at having chosen so badly, stayed so long. What's the alternative? She whispered. Lucas leaned back, considering. First, we need to secure your immediate safety. That means dealing with the car, moving it, hiding it, something. Second, we need a better destination than your cousin's place in Spokane, somewhere Richard wouldn't think to look. Third, we need resources. Money, transportation, documentation. The methodical way he laid out these steps calmed Elena somewhat. This wasn't empty reassurance. It was practical problem-solving. I can help with all three, Lucas continued. But you need to be clear about what you want, Elena. Are you looking to disappear permanently? To establish legal protection? To confront him through proper channels? Elena looked toward the living room, where her daughters were now building a fort out of sofa cushions, Hamlet supervising from his quilt by the fire. The pig caught her gaze and snorted softly, as if offering encouragement. I want them to be safe, she said finally. I want them to grow up without fear, without walking on eggshells, without thinking that's what love looks like. She squared her shoulders. I want Richard to face consequences for what he's done. Real consequences, not just another slap on the wrist. Lucas nodded, something like approval flickering in his eyes. Then we don't run. We strategize. As the afternoon wore on, they developed a plan. Lucas would drive into town the next day, assuming the snow let up enough to clear the roads. He would arrange for Elena's car to be towed not to the local garage, but to his property, where it could be hidden in an equipment shed. He would also make some calls to a lawyer friend in Helena who specialized in domestic violence cases, and to contacts who might help secure new documentation for Elena and the girls. What about tonight? Elena asked, glancing nervously toward the windows as darkness began to fall. If he somehow tracked us to the car. This place isn't easy to find if you don't know it's here, Lucas assured her. And I've got security measures in place. He nodded toward a panel near the back door that Elena hadn't noticed before, a modern alarm system that seemed at odds with the rustic cabin aesthetic. As if sensing her surprise, Lucas added, Living alone out here, you take precautions. I had it installed after a bear decided my pantry looked interesting last spring. Despite his reassurances, Elena insisted on checking all the doors and windows before putting the girls to bed that night. As she tucked them in, surrounding them with extra pillows and what had become a nightly ritual since fleeing California, she was struck by how quickly they had adapted to these new surroundings. I like Mr. Lucas, Lily announced as Elena pulled the quilt up to her chin. He makes good pancakes. And he helped us with our snowman family, Sophie added sleepily. Emma said nothing, but she reached out to touch Elena's face, a gentle gesture that spoke volumes. Of the three, Emma had always been the most perceptive, the most attuned to emotional undercurrents. We're going to stay here a little while, Elena told them. Is that okay with you girls? 3 identical nods answered her. Hamlet, already settled at the foot of the bed in a fresh sweater, the pink one having been washed and dried by the fire, grunted his apparent approval as well. Just until we figure some things out, Elena continued. Mr. Lucas is going to help us. Is Daddy still looking for us? Sophie asked, her small face suddenly serious. Elena hesitated, torn between honesty and the desire to protect them from harsh realities. Probably, she admitted finally. But we're safe here. Because of Mr. Lucas? Lily pressed. Yes, Elena said. And because we're smart and brave and we have each other. And Hamlet, Emma whispered, reaching down to pat the pig's head. And Hamlet, Elena agreed, smiling despite the weight on her heart. Now sleep, my loves. Tomorrow is another day. Downstairs, she found Lucas on the porch, despite the cold, staring out at the snow-covered landscape. The storm had finally abated, leaving behind a world transformed by white. Stars pierced the clear night sky, brilliant in the mountain darkness. Elena joined him, wrapping her borrowed jacket tighter around herself. Thank you, she said simply. For everything you're doing. Lucas didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I couldn't save them," he said after a long moment. "Jessica and our daughter. The truck came out of nowhere, crossed the center line. They died instantly, or so they told me." Elena remained silent, recognizing that he needed to speak these words, perhaps for the first time to anyone besides himself. "For 3 years, I've been living with that helplessness," he continued, "that failure. But this," he gestured vaguely toward the cabin where her daughters slept, "this is something I can do, something concrete." "It's not just concrete," Elena said softly. "It's life-saving." Lucas finally turned to her, his face shadowed in the porch light. "I don't know what kind of man threatens his own children, uses them as pawns to control their mother, but I know he doesn't deserve to call himself a father." The fierce protectiveness in his voice warmed Elena more than any fire could have. For so long, she had stood alone against Richard's manipulations and violence, doubting herself, doubting her perceptions, doubting her right to safety. Now, standing beside this quiet, wounded man who had opened his home to strangers in a snowstorm, Elena felt something unfamiliar stirring within her. Not just gratitude, but a tentative hope. Hope that perhaps the road ahead, though difficult, would not be one she had to walk alone. Inside the cabin, Hamlet's soft snores mingled with the gentle breathing of her sleeping daughters. Outside, the Montana night wrapped around them like a protective cloak, stars bearing witness to an unlikely alliance forged in desperate circumstances. A man with a broken heart, a woman with a bruised spirit, 3 identical little girls, and a pig in a sweater, finding unexpected sanctuary in each other's wounded lives. Morning light filtered through the pines, catching in the crystalline frost that had formed overnight. Lucas's truck growled to life, the sound echoing across the snow-hushed landscape. Elena stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself against the cold, watching as he prepared to make the journey into town. "Remember," Lucas said, rolling down his window, "stay inside, keep the doors locked. Dan Cooper knows you're here. If there's trouble, use the radio in my office." Channel 3. Elena nodded, the knot of anxiety in her stomach tightening. During their week at the cabin, she'd grown accustomed to Lucas's reassuring presence. The thought of being alone, vulnerable, even for a few hours, brought back the familiar edge of panic she'd lived with for years. "We'll be fine," she said, forcing confidence into her voice. "The girls are excited about baking cookies, and Hamlet's on guard duty." As if summoned by his name, the pig appeared beside her, his sweater freshly laundered, and his demeanor alert. Lucas smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. "World's most unlikely watchdog," he commented, then grew serious again. "I should be back by mid-afternoon, but if the lawyer can see us today, I might be later." "Take whatever time you need," Elena assured him. "This is too important to rush." With a final nod, Lucas shifted the truck into gear and began the careful descent down the snow-packed driveway. Elena watched until the vehicle disappeared around the bend, then turned back to the cabin, steeling herself for a day of pretending confidence for her daughter's sake. Inside, the triplets were still in their pajamas, spread across the living room floor with paper and crayons that Lucas had unearthed from a forgotten drawer. They were drawing elaborate pictures of their snow family, complete with Hamlet's snow pig, each interpretation as unique as the girls themselves, despite their identical appearances. "Is Mr. Lucas gone?" Sophie asked, looking up from her artwork. Elena nodded, moving to the kitchen to start the promised cookie baking. "He's gone to town to get supplies and talk to some people who can help us." "Help us with Daddy?" Lily asked, always the most direct of the 3. "Yes, sweetheart." "Help us figure out how to stay safe." Emma, silent as usual, abandoned her drawing and came to stand beside Elena at the counter. Without a word, she began helping measure flour for the cookies, her small hands careful and precise. Of the 3, Emma had always been the most perceptive, the one who sensed emotional undercurrents and responded in her quiet way. "Is Mr. Lucas our new daddy?" Lily's question cut through the kitchen like a thunderclap. Elena nearly dropped the mixing bowl. "No, honey. Mr. Lucas is a friend who's helping us." But he makes pancakes and helps with snow people and doesn't yell, Sophie added, joining them in the kitchen. That's what daddies are supposed to do. The simple observation, delivered with a child's unvarnished honesty, struck Elena to her core. Her daughters, despite their young age, had already formed a clear understanding of what healthy relationships should look like, and recognized that their own father fell catastrophically short of that standard. Not all daddies are the same, Elena said carefully, cracking an egg into the bowl. But you're right that people who care about each other should be kind and helpful. Mr. Lucas is kind, Emma whispered, her soft voice startling in its rarity. Elena smiled at her quietest daughter, touched by the simple declaration. Yes, he is. The morning passed in a blur of domestic activity. Cookies were baked, games were played, and Hamlet was adorned with a new paper crown the girls had crafted for him. The pig bore this indignity with remarkable patience, seeming to understand that his role as the triplets' confidant and playmate was more important than his dignity. It was nearly noon when Elena heard it. The crunch of tires on snow, the sound of a vehicle approaching up the long driveway. Relief flooded through her. Lucas was back earlier than expected. She moved to the window, anticipation turning to ice in her veins as she saw not Lucas's familiar truck, but a police cruiser slowly making its way toward the cabin. "Girls," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "I need you to go upstairs right now. Take Hamlet and play in the bedroom until I come get you." Something in her tone must have triggered their well-honed instincts for danger. Without questioning, all three immediately gathered their pig and headed upstairs, silent and solemn as they disappeared from view. Elena's mind raced. It might be nothing, a routine check, a local officer who knew Lucas, but the timing, the coincidence. Her hands trembled as she retrieved Lucas's hunting rifle from the cabinet, where he kept it secured, but accessible. The cruiser stopped in front of the cabin, and Elena's worst fears were confirmed as Richard stepped out, resplendent in his deputy sheriff's uniform, mirrored sunglasses reflecting the snow's glare. He looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in that clean-cut, authoritative way that had once seemed so appealing, now revealed as the perfect camouflage for a predator. He wasn't alone. Another officer remained in the passenger seat, visible only as a silhouette behind the windshield. They both laughed, the tension of the moment breaking. "He really does snore louder than your truck," Elena observed. Lucas grinned. "Good thing I didn't make that the permanent condition for staying." Elena took a deep breath, letting herself consider the possibility he was offering. Not just shelter, but a future. A home. "I can't promise anything right now," she said honestly. "There's still so much to resolve with Richard, so much healing to do." "I'm not asking for promises," Lucas assured her. "Just possibility." Elena looked out at the snow-covered landscape, at the mountains standing solid against the star-filled sky. 10 days ago, she had arrived at this cabin desperate and afraid, with 3 traumatized children and a pig in a sweater. She had been running from danger with no clear destination in mind. Now, for the first time, she found herself considering what it might mean to run toward something instead. Toward safety, toward healing, toward a life rebuilt from the broken pieces of the past. "Possibility," she repeated softly. "I think I can manage that." Inside, the triplets slept peacefully, Hamlet standing guard at the foot of their bed. Outside, the Montana winter wrapped around the cabin like a protective embrace, keeping its inhabitants safe within walls that had once known only grief, now slowly learning the language of hope. And in that moment, under a canopy of stars that had witnessed countless human struggles and triumphs, 2 wounded souls stood side by side, not yet healed, not yet whole, but facing forward together, watching for the dawn. 2 months passed in the rhythm of mountain seasons, winter slowly relinquishing its grip as March brought the first tentative signs of spring to the Montana highlands. The legal battle with Richard had taken unexpected turns, both devastating and hopeful. Lucas's attorney had uncovered a pattern of misconduct in Richard's department, complaints buried, witnesses intimidated, evidence manipulated. When confronted with the mounting evidence against him, Richard's superior officer had been forced to place him on administrative leave pending investigation. It should have been a victory, but Elena knew better than to celebrate too soon. A cornered predator was at its most dangerous, and Richard's humiliation had only fueled his obsession with reclaiming his daughters and punishing the woman who had dared to defy him. On this particular morning, Elena stood at the kitchen window, watching as Lucas showed the triplets how to tap the maple trees that dotted the eastern edge of the property. The girls, bundled in their new spring jackets, purchased on a rare trip into town, followed his every move with rapt attention, mimicking his techniques with solemn concentration. In the 2 months they'd spent at Hope Ridge Cabin, as the girls had christened it, after discovering the name carved into a wooden sign in the shed, Lucas had transformed from reluctant host to patient teacher. He taught the triplets to identify animal tracks in the snow, to build proper snowmen that wouldn't collapse, to recognize the constellations in the clear mountain sky. And they, in turn, had taught him to see his world through fresh eyes, full of wonder and possibility rather than isolation and grief. Hamlet waddled across the yard to join them, sporting a new green sweater that Emma had helped knit under Elena's guidance. The pig had thrived in the mountain environment, his formerly rotund figure slimming down with daily outdoor excursions. He still slept at the foot of the girl's bed each night, but during the day he had appointed himself Lucas's unofficial assistant, following him around the property as he performed his daily tasks. The changes in the cabin were as profound as those in its inhabitants. What had been a sparse bachelor retreat was now undeniably a home. Children's artwork adorned the refrigerator. Books and toys occupied shelves that had stood empty for years. The upstairs bedroom, once a painful reminder of dreams deferred, was now transformed with colorful bedspreads and curtains sewn from fabric Elena had found in town. Most significantly, the door to the room that would have been Jessica's nursery, the room Lucas had kept closed for 3 years, now stood open. Together, they had cleared out the half-finished crib and changing table, donating them to a women's shelter in Helena. In their place was a small desk where Elena had begun freelancing as a virtual assistant, using skills from her previous career to build a modest income stream independent of both Richard and Lucas. The telephone rang, jarring Elena from her reflections. She crossed the kitchen quickly, her heart accelerating as it did whenever unexpected contact from the outside world intruded on their sanctuary. "Hello? Elena, it's Martin Wallace." The lawyer's voice was tense, lacking its usual measured calm. "We have a situation." Elena gripped the counter for support, bracing herself. "What's happened?" "Richard failed to appear for his disciplinary hearing this morning. His service weapon is missing from the station armory." Martin paused. The silence waited with implication. "The sheriff's department has issued an alert, but I wanted to call you directly. His supervisor believes he may be headed your way." Cold fear washed through Elena, familiar yet no less paralyzing for its familiarity. "How would he know where we are? We've been so careful." "Someone from the department must have tipped him off about the case details," Martin replied grimly. "Elena, listen to me. The sheriff is sending officers to your location, but they're at least 3 hours out. You need to leave. Now." Elena looked out the window at Lucas and the girls, still absorbed in their maple tapping lesson, blissfully unaware of the danger heading toward them. "I understand. Thank you, Martin." She hung up and moved with practiced efficiency, years of preparing for Richard's volatile moods, having trained her for emergency response. She packed only essentials: medications, important documents, a change of clothes for each of them. Then she called the county sheriff, confirming what Martin had told her and providing additional details about Richard's vehicle and likely approach route. By the time Lucas and the girls came in, cheeks flushed with cold and excitement, Elena had their emergency bags by the door and Hamlet's travel crate ready. "We tapped 3 trees, Sophie announced proudly. "And Mr. Lucas says we can make our own maple syrup." Lucas's smile faded as he registered Elena's expression in the packed bags. "What's wrong?" "Richard's coming," Elena said quietly, the words enough to communicate the severity of the situation. "Martin called. He missed his hearing, took his service weapon. Law enforcement is on the way, but they won't get here in time," Lucas finished, his face hardening. "How long do we have?" 3 hours. Maybe less." Lucas nodded once, switching immediately to action mode. "Girls," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "we need to go on a little adventure. Can you help Hamlet get ready for a trip?" The triplets, sensing the tension but responding to Lucas's calm direction, nodded and moved to help the pig into his travel crate, an activity they had practiced as a game in preparation for just such an emergency. While they were occupied, Lucas pulled Elena aside. "We're not running," he said, his voice low and determined. "Not this time. Lucas, he has a gun, Elena whispered urgently. He's beyond rational thought at this point. Which is exactly why running won't solve anything, Lucas countered. He'll just keep coming, keep hunting you. This ends today, one way or another. The fierce protectiveness in his eyes both comforted and alarmed Elena. What are you planning? Dan Cooper's place, Lucas said. It's defensible, has clear sightlines in all directions, and his wife Sarah is a former state trooper. The girls and Hamlet will be safe there while we deal with Richard. We? Elena echoed, her voice rising slightly. Lucas took her hands in his expression softening. You're not facing him alone, Elena. Never again. But you do need to face him. Look him in the eye and show him you're not afraid anymore. It's the only language men like Richard understand. Deep down, Elena knew he was right. 2 months of safety and support had rebuilt her confidence, helped her reclaim the strength Richard had systematically crushed. The legal system was working, but slowly, hampered by Richard's connections and the complexities of cross-state jurisdiction. A final confrontation had always been inevitable. Okay, she agreed quietly, but the girls are my priority, if anything goes wrong. It won't, Lucas assured her. Trust me. Within 30 minutes, they had loaded Lucas's truck and were heading down the mountain toward Dan Cooper's ranch. The girls, sensing the gravity of the situation despite Lucas and Elena's attempts to frame it as an adventure, were unusually quiet in the back seat. Hamlet, secured in his travel crate between Sophie and Lily, grunted occasionally as if offering reassurance. Will Daddy hurt us? Emma asked suddenly, her soft voice breaking the tense silence. Elena's heart contracted painfully. No, sweetheart, Mr. Lucas and I won't let that happen. Is that why we're practicing the hiding game? Lily pressed. Because of Daddy? Lucas caught Elena's eye, a silent question passing between them. They had agreed early on not to lie to the children, even when the truth was difficult. Yes, Elena admitted. Sometimes adults who are very angry make bad choices. The hiding game is to keep you safe if that happens. Like when Daddy broke the picture frames? Sophie asked. And Hamlet bit him? Exactly like that, Elena confirmed, her throat tight with emotion. These children had witnessed far too much violence in their young lives, had been forced to develop survival strategies no 4-year-old should need. Hamlet was very brave, Lucas commented, steering the conversation toward empowerment rather than fear. And so were all of you. Brave people know when to hide and when to stand their ground. Are you going to stand your ground, Mr. Lucas? Lily's question hung in the air, innocent yet profound. Lucas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yes, he said simply, your mom and I both are. Dan and Sarah Cooper welcomed them with the efficiency of people accustomed to crisis management. Their ranch house, situated on an open plain with views in all directions, was indeed the perfect defensive position. While Sarah showed the girls and Hamlet to a comfortable basement recreation room stocked with snacks and activities, Dan and Lucas conferred about security measures. Sheriff's Department called, Dan informed them. They've set up roadblocks on the main highways, but there are too many back roads to cover them all. Richard knows those back roads, Elena said grimly. He's hunted in these mountains for years. Sarah, rejoining them after settling the children, nodded in agreement. That's why we're not waiting for him to find us. We're controlling the encounter. The former state trooper's confidence was reassuring. I've called in some favors. We've got off-duty officers positioned discreetly around the property. If Richard shows up, he'll think he's dealing with just us, but he'll be walking into a carefully monitored situation. You think he'll come here? Elena asked. Not the cabin? He'll check the cabin first, Lucas predicted. But he'll figure out quickly that you've relocated. This is the most logical place. He knows Dan and I are friends. The next hour passed in tense preparation. Elena found herself moving through familiar patterns of hypervigilance, checking windows, cataloging potential weapons, mapping escape routes. Habits formed during years of living with Richard's volatility. The difference now was that she wasn't alone in her vigilance. Lucas moved beside her, a steady presence reinforcing rather than undermining her instincts. You've done this before, he observed quietly as they checked the perimeter of the ranch house together, prepared for the worst. Elena nodded, scanning the horizon. Every day for the last 3 years of our marriage. It becomes second nature, reading the signs, preparing for the storm. Lucas's hand found hers, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "You shouldn't have had to live that way. No one should," Elena agreed. "But it taught me something important, how to survive. And now—" She turned to face him, drawing strength from his unwavering gaze. "Now I want to do more than just survive." The sound of tires on gravel cut their conversation short. A patrol vehicle was approaching, not the local sheriff, but a Missoula County cruiser, moving slowly up the long driveway toward the ranch house. "He's here," Elena whispered, her body tensing involuntarily. Lucas squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "Remember the plan. Let him see you're not running, not hiding, but keep your distance. We want this to end peacefully." Elena nodded, drawing a deep breath as they moved to the front porch. Dan and Sarah joined them, Sarah discreetly checking the service weapon holstered at her hip. The four of them presented a united front as Richard's cruiser came to a stop in the circular driveway. For a long moment, Richard remained in the vehicle, assessing the situation. Then the driver's door opened and he emerged, still in his deputy's uniform, despite being on administrative leave. The sight of him, so familiar yet, now somehow diminished, sent a complex wave of emotions through Elena. Fear, anger, pity, and finally, a surprising calm. "Elena." Richard's voice carried across the yard, controlled but with an undercurrent of rage. "We need to talk. Alone." "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my friends," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Richard's gaze swept over the group, lingering with particular hostility on Lucas. "This doesn't concern them. This is about our family." "There is no our family anymore, Richard," Elena stated clearly. "The girls are safe, they're happy, and they're staying with me." Richard took a step forward, one hand moving subtly toward his hip where Elena knew his service weapon would be holstered. "You've poisoned them against me, turned them into accessories to your delusions." His voice was rising, control slipping. "Dragging them across state lines, living with some mountain man, parading around with that ridiculous pig. What kind of mother does that?" "The kind who protects her children from an abuser," Elena answered, refusing to be baited into defensiveness. "The kind who shows them that love doesn't hurt, that family means safety, not fear." Richard's face contorted with rage. "You think you can just take my daughters and disappear? That I'll let some stranger play daddy to my children?" "They're not property, Richard," Elena said, taking a step forward despite Lucas's warning hand on her arm. "They're people. 3 unique, brilliant little people who deserve better than what you showed them." "You have no right," Richard began, his hand now clearly moving toward his weapon. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to keep your hands visible," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of her former profession. "You're on private property, and you're currently exhibiting threatening behavior toward these individuals." Richard's eyes snapped to Sarah, noticing her holstered weapon for the first time. His expression shifted, calculation replacing blind rage as he reassessed his odds. "This is a private family matter," he insisted, though his hand moved away from his hip. "I have joint custody." "Not anymore," Elena cut in. "The emergency order granted last week revoked your visitation rights pending the outcome of your disciplinary hearing, the one you failed to attend this morning." Richard's face paled slightly. He hadn't known about the emergency order. "That's temporary. Once I explain—" "Explain what, Richard?" Elena pressed, finding strength in finally confronting the man who had terrorized her for so long. "The bruises? The broken bones? The night you tried to take Sophie from her bed? Or maybe you'd like to explain to your superiors why you've crossed county lines with your service weapon while on administrative leave." As if on cue, the sound of approaching vehicles drew everyone's attention. 2 sheriff's cruisers were coming up the driveway, lights flashing but sirens silent. Richard's expression shifted from rage to panic as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. His hand moved lightning fast to his weapon, drawing it with practiced efficiency. "I'm taking my daughters," he declared, the gun now pointed directly at Elena. "You've left me no choice." Time seemed to slow, the world narrowing to the barrel of Richard's gun and the cold determination in his eyes. Elena had always known, somewhere deep inside, that it might come to this. that Richard's need for control would eventually override all else, even his own self-preservation. What she hadn't anticipated was her own reaction. Instead of the paralyzing fear that had defined so many years of their relationship, she felt a strange, calm clarity. Richard no longer towered over her in her perception. He was just a man, a damaged, dangerous man, but not the all-powerful force she had once believed him to be. "The girls aren't here, Richard," she said quietly. "They're safe, surrounded by people who care about them. This standoff won't change that." "You're lying," Richard snarled, the gun wavering slightly. "They're inside." "I know they are." "Lower your weapon, Deputy Hawkins," came an authoritative voice from behind him. The sheriff's deputies had positioned themselves strategically, their own weapons drawn. "You're outnumbered and in violation of multiple statutes. This doesn't end well for you." Richard's gaze darted between Elena and the approaching officers, desperation replacing calculation. For a terrible moment, Elena thought he might actually fire, his final act of control over the woman who had dared to leave him. Then, unexpectedly, a different sound cut through the tension. A distinctive, rumbling snore emanating from an open window on the second floor of the ranch house. Richard's eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that?" Despite the gravity of the situation, Elena couldn't suppress a small smile. "Hamlet," she confirmed. Still snoring louder than Lucas's truck. The absurdity of the moment, a standoff interrupted by a pig's snore, seemed to puncture Richard's rage like a balloon. The gun lowered slightly as confusion momentarily replaced fury. It was all the opening the deputies needed. They moved in with practiced efficiency, disarming Richard and securing him before he could recover his focus. As they read him his rights, a litany of charges including crossing county lines with a service weapon while on leave, violating a restraining order, and threatening civilians with a firearm. Richard seemed to shrink before Elena's eyes, the imposing figure of authority reduced to a handcuffed man being led to a patrol car. He looked back once, his eyes finding Elena's. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow now, the words of a man who had finally run out of power. "Yes, it is," Elena replied softly, more to herself than to him. "It's been over for a long time." As the patrol cars departed, Elena felt Lucas's arm slide around her shoulders, solid and reassuring. "You did it," he said simply. "You stood your ground." Elena leaned into his embrace, the adrenaline crash leaving her shaky but triumphant. "We stood our ground," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this alone." From inside the house came the sound of small feet pounding downstairs, followed by excited voices. Despite strict instructions to stay in the basement rec room until given the all-clear, the triplets had evidently decided the departure of the police cars signaled the end of danger. They burst onto the porch in a whirlwind of energy, Hamlet trotting behind them, his snout held high as if aware of his role in the confrontation. "Was that Daddy?" Sophie asked, her small face serious as she looked up at Elena. Elena knelt down to her daughter's level, gathering all three into her arms. "Yes, sweetheart, but he's gone now, and he won't be coming back for a very long time." "Did he try to hurt you again?" Lily pressed, always the most direct of the three. "He was very angry," Elena acknowledged, committed to honesty even in difficult moments. "But Mr. Lucas and Miss Sarah and the police officers made sure everyone was safe." Emma, silent as usual, reached out to touch Elena's cheek, her small fingers gentle. "You're not scared anymore," she observed softly. The simple statement, delivered with a child's clarity, struck Elena to her core. Emma was right. The fear that had been her constant companion for so long, the hypervigilance, the constant assessment of Richard's moods, the underlying dread, had finally lifted. In its place was something new, not the absence of fear, but the presence of confidence, of certainty. "No, sweetheart," she agreed, smiling through sudden tears. "I'm not scared anymore." Hamlet nudged his way into the family circle, snuffling at Emma's hair and earning giggles from all three girls. His pink sweater had somehow acquired a coating of dust during his upstairs exploration, giving him a disheveled, adventurous appearance. Hamlet helped too, Sophie informed them seriously. He did his super loud snore. Lucas laughed, the sound rich with relief and genuine amusement. That he did. Scared your dad right out of his boots. Later that evening, after the excitement had settled, and the girls were tucked into bed in Dan and Sarah's guest room, Elena found herself on the porch again, watching as stars emerged in the clear mountain sky. Lucas joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "Penny for your thoughts," he offered, passing her a steaming mug. Elena accepted the tea gratefully, the warmth seeping into hands still slightly trembling from the day's events. "I was just thinking about journeys," she said after a moment. "How you never really know where they'll lead when you start out." Lucas leaned against the porch railing beside her. "When you showed up at my door 2 months ago, 3 little girls and a pig in a sweater, I never imagined we'd end up here. Facing down my ex-husband in an armed standoff?" Elena asked with a wry smile. "Building a family," Lucas corrected gently. "Finding purpose again, reasons to wake up excited about the day ahead." The simple truth of his words washed over Elena like a healing balm. In the midst of crisis and danger, something beautiful had been forming. Connections strengthening, trust building, wounds slowly mending. "The lawyer thinks Richard will be facing serious charges," she said, changing the subject slightly. "Enough to ensure the girls will be safe from him for a very long time," Lucas nodded. "Martin called while you were getting the girls settled. The judge has already signed an order terminating Richard's parental rights pending the criminal trial. Given the evidence and today's events, it's likely to become permanent." Elena closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the magnitude of this development. "Freedom," she whispered. "Actual, legal freedom. Which means you have choices now," Lucas continued, his voice carefully neutral. "About your future, about where you and the girls will live." Elena turned to face him fully, studying the face that had become so dear to her over the past months. The strong lines softened by compassion, the eyes that had seen tragedy yet still held hope. "Remember what you said to me that night on the porch, about possibility?" she asked. Lucas nodded, a hint of vulnerability in his expression. "I meant it then. I mean it even more now." "The girls love the cabin," Elena said softly. "They love the mountains, the space to run, the animals." She paused, gathering her courage. "They love you." "And their mother?" Lucas asked, the question hanging between them, weighted with possibility. Instead of answering with words, Elena closed the distance between them, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. She rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. A gentle kiss, tentative at first, then deepening as Lucas's arms encircled her. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I'll take that as a positive sign," he murmured. Elena laughed softly. "The cabin needs work if we're all going to stay permanently. The girls will need their own room eventually. And Hamlet should probably have a proper pen outside, though I doubt we'll ever convince him to sleep anywhere but at the foot of their bed." "You're already planning renovations?" Lucas asked, a smile spreading across his face. "I'm planning a future," Elena corrected. "Something I stopped doing a long time ago." She wrapped her arms around his waist, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I can't promise it will be easy. The girls still have nightmares sometimes. I still have moments of panic, triggers I'm working through. And I still have days when grief hits me sideways," Lucas acknowledged. "Days when I miss Jessica so much it's hard to breathe." He tucked a strand of hair behind Elena's ear, his touch reverent. "But that's the thing about healing. It doesn't happen all at once. It comes in moments, in choices, in small steps forward." From inside the house came the familiar sound of Hamlet's snore, audible even through closed windows. They both laughed, the tension of the day finally releasing in shared amusement. "He really does snore louder than your truck," Elena observed, leaning into Lucas's embrace. "Thank goodness," Lucas replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Otherwise, you might have left after that first night." As they stood together under the vast Montana sky, Elena reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her to this moment. 2 months ago, she had arrived at a stranger's door with nothing but desperation, 3 frightened children and a pig in a sweater. She had been running from danger, with no destination in mind beyond escape. Now she found herself running towards something instead, toward healing, toward joy, toward a future built on trust and genuine care. It wouldn't be perfect. There would still be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But for the first time in years, Elena felt equipped to face those challenges, not alone, but surrounded by love and support. Inside the house, her daughters slept peacefully, Hamlet standing guard as always. Outside, the mountains kept their ancient vigil, witnesses to countless human stories of loss and redemption. And here on this porch, two people who had known profound suffering found themselves opening to the possibility of profound joy. A second chance neither had dared to hope for, born from a desperate knock on a cabin door one snowy night. "Stay," Lucas whispered against her hair, an echo of that first conditional offer. "Not just until we figure things out. Stay for good." Elena smiled, her heart full to bursting with something she had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. "As long as Hamlet doesn't start snoring louder," she teased. Lucas laughed, the sound carrying across the peaceful ranch yard. "I think we can live with that condition." And as they sealed this new promise with another kiss, Elena knew with bone-deep certainty that they had all: a lonely widower, a healing survivor, 3 remarkable little girls, and 1 extraordinary pig finally found their way home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.